Welcome to Real Chat with Kat, the podcast that's all about real conversations for real transformation. I'm your host, Kat Pulcinelli, professional speaker, MC, and best-selling international author. Here, we tackle the tough stuff, the mud that we all have found ourselves in. We talk about the pivots, the challenges, and the victories that shape our lives and our businesses. From overcoming trauma and finding your voice to navigating life's unexpected twists, we get raw, honest, and open. You'll hear from inspiring guests who share their stories of resilience, healing, and growth. Whether it's breaking through emotional abuse, embracing self-worth, or thriving in entrepreneurship, you'll find connection, empowerment, and the tools to keep you moving forward. So grab your favorite drink, settle in, and get ready for stories that hit home and conversations that make a difference. Let's get real together. Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining me today on this episode of Real Chat with Kat. I am so excited to have you here with me today, and I am so excited to bring out my next guest. We've had a chance to chat a little while before. I am super excited about all the things that he has going on and the message that he's spreading and the uniqueness about the message and this book that he has coming up as well. So, Jon, thank you so much for being a part of the podcast today.
Oh, thank you. It's been, I think, 4 or 5 months since we spoke. It was October. And I was so enraptured by the conversation then. And then I think I had to go to Mongolia and then the fall hit and everything else. So I'm really honored to be here and speaking to you as a fellow entrepreneur. And really, I love listening to your podcast and sussing out these I'll say mythic journeys, these tales people are going through and the courage of how they find themselves through, entrepreneurship and these bold adventures they're doing in life. I appreciate what you're doing in the world. It's great stuff.
Oh, thank you, Jon. Well, I am so excited to have you, and I appreciate your patience for being a part of the podcast. And I am so excited to be able to share your message and I feel like we had so much fun in our conversation. I'm pretty sure we went over our time as well,
Yeah.
but you're just the way that you speak about things and the way that you have connections with stuff is so unique. And so I'm so excited to bring you to everyone. So everybody that is listening, be sure that you've got a pen and a piece of paper out because I know there's going to be some golden nuggets in this one. So as we get started, then Jon, do us all a favor and tell everybody who you are and what it is that you do.
Sure. I'll try to lens this through the lens of entrepreneurship, and we'll just see where it goes from there. So
Sure.
I like doing the maps where you start with one and you just kind of note out and you draw these lines that, entrepreneurship, starting there. Both my parents, I would say, were absolutely entrepreneurs. They were PhD therapists, both of them. So they had their own private practice. And they were also farmers. So I grew up in this little tiny farm in the middle of Kansas. Went to a very, very, very small high school. So a very, very small place. And in that journey, I think of entrepreneurship and seeing their struggles and their courage to live in the middle of nowhere and to try to help people through this therapy practice. I think that there's a lot of different things I learned. And one emergence of my life has been through design. And I love designing experiences for people and understanding how people feel about the world and their struggles and how do we bring a more divine sense of design that actually helps people in their everyday life. I think another thing that was really installed in me is this facilitator. And my childhood was very, 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 very chaotic. I don't remember a lot of my childhood, but the things I remember are always straightening and organizing everything around the house. I would label myself as being neurodivergent, and there absolutely was this hyper-vigilant fixation on organizing the world around me to try to make sense of the chaos that was happening. And in that, there's this facilitator in me that emerged. And I do facilitation in organizations, helping leaders and teams, specifically in healthcare, launch new ventures into the world. And I do that through workshops and facilitation of teams. So I love facilitation. I think the last is really as a coach. And I got to see my parents help people. And there is this love of just seeing the depth and beauty in people as they emerge. And I think you you share that, and there's this courage that you see in people when they step into their authentic self. And I very much love that. But a lot of that was born from growing up on this small little farm in the middle of nowhere. And there's a lot of stories I'm sure we'll get into of how that shaped that. But today I do very much that. I work in corporate teams, helping them to transform by building products and launching those in the world. And then I do a lot of work on the side, helping individuals through their own transformational journeys.
I love that. And I feel like, yes, we're definitely on the same page when it comes to wanting to see people and where they are going. I think that that to me is one of the neatest things to be a part of for someone, especially when you meet someone where you already see where they can go and they haven't realized it just yet, and then you get to be a part of that journey. So you almost kind of get to be like that cheerleader as they start to emerge in themselves. And I think that that is one of the coolest feelings to be able to have, which is so funny to say that because I feel like I was always a cheerleader back in the day as a teenager and stuff like that, but I feel like I also went through a really huge period of judging others, right? As well as judging myself, but definitely judging others. And so it's so interesting to see, like, as I have come through this journey and from, childhood to the things that I went through to healing and to where I'm at now, like, I almost kind of feel like there was like this full circle moment where there's a huge piece of me that when I really think about it and look back, I'm like, that's really who I was when I was like a young teen, like young adult. And then I kind of I got jaded, I got into a bad relationship and things like that. But because of this healing, like ultimately, like that's who I was at my core. Do you feel like there's any piece of that that you kind of attribute to from like when you were younger to like where you are now?
Oh, absolutely. And maybe we can go back and forth on this. I think there's a lot of courage around that. To me, maybe the words I would use are it's like a snake shedding your skin over and over and over and over again. It's like you're constantly peeling back these layers, and each layer there's this courage to release that thing that you weren't, and to release these things that happened, and to understand the beauty of those moments from failed relationships, abusive relationships, addictions, and you're like shedding the skin back to this who you really are. And I think there's this fear of really seeing who you really are deep down. And some of those courageous layers I think are fun to talk about. And maybe to get into that, I think the human psyche, kind of as a definition, is so powerful to observe in that emergence. The psyche speaks to you in symbols. So, when you're looking at the clock and you see, 222 all the time at the clock, or you have this element that keeps popping up in your life, or this bird keeps flying by that's a falcon. Like, I think there's so much out there trying to help you emerge into who you are if you just watch. So I'm interested in you, like the White Lotus. I know this was one of our conversations when we started, like, in your emergence and your courage to find who you are. What were the symbols in your life? And I don't know if the White Lotus is something that speaks to you a lot.
Yes, and it's so funny because I know that you and I talked about this prior to, with the whole
Mhm.
name of my company and everything. What's really interesting is I feel like, and here's the thing, I have to look back to be able to see the symbols that were popping up for me back then. But like now, I am present enough to see those, right? And I think that that comes along with that journey of healing and learning to slow down and be okay with that, which can be really, really hard to do, right? Especially when you are in certain situations or you're a single parent and you have all these things going on. It's so easy to get caught up in. So when I think about the symbols and things like beforehand, I think for me, it was more of like the symbols of my kids and seeing the future in them and then deciding like, ooh, that's not going to work at all. Then coming out of those situations and really starting to work on myself, I do feel like the lotus kept coming up. Ripples were something that I also saw as well, which is why it's a part of my logo. And I feel that with the lotus, which was something I kept going back to, is like you can start in the dirt, you can start in the dirt, but you can be something absolutely beautiful. Like to me, it's just a beautiful symbolism for that. And I see a lot of people use that, in their logos and stuff as well. And I'm always curious to know if like that's the reason why, or if they just use it because it's peaceful and the meaning's behind it. But for me, that was the whole reason why I got my first tattoo 5, 7 years ago now.
Hmm.
And it was for that reason. I wanted the lotus tattooed on me as a reminder that like we go through crap, but I can still turn out something different. And that did become the symbol, and I see it a lot now. But what's really interesting is you said falcon. I tend to see hawks. That is a thing for me. And there's uncertain days where I'm like, 1, 2, 3, oh, 7. I'm like, okay, today's gonna be because today's going to be a really beautiful day. There's going to be messages in there. Like it's really interesting when you start to pay attention to those things that you start to see them. So now I'm curious to know, okay, what were your symbols then? What were
Oh, geez, I have a, I started this document maybe 8 years ago. I call it Me Now. And it was this attempt at being really, really present with myself and knowing that like every second I'm changing and emerging. And how am I present with like, who am I right now? And, had periods of my life that were very tumultuous. And I didn't even know if I would get through those periods. I would just keep going to that document, even by the hour. I would keep changing it and evolving it based on what was happening around me. Um, but there are a lot of symbols. Even yesterday, I had an eagle fly over me, and I'm like, what does that mean? Last night, I had an owl pass over me. But the falcon's absolutely one symbol that's always been near and dear to my heart. And I think drilling into this idea of beauty and courage and peeling back the layers. I think that falcon has always been the symbol to me of being able to lift yourself up and see the beauty of the entire world and all these things that are happening, and then to be able to dive down really quickly and have this courage and boldness to go into these areas and almost like peck and pluck and grab something down on the earth that needs to be dealt with and then pull it back up to a higher perspective. Each person I think has their own meaning and intent with the symbols they see. But that falcon has guided me in business. Being in the consulting world in design, or as a coach, or as a facilitator, or even in my own healing journey. It's like, how do you pull yourself up in that split second to say, okay, what's really happening in this situation? What do I
Mm,
really need to know? What's the beauty of this? Yes, I'm getting triggered by this person, but there's a lot of layers. There's a lot of tapestry and nature around that's informing what's happening in this situation. And then how do I zoom back into my body and say, okay, I want to be present as a human in this moment on the ground. So I think the falcon's always been that for me, especially being in childhood. It was a very, very, very chaotic childhood, and I don't even think I realized that until my mid 30s, where I was in a relationship that just mirrored back to me constantly, disassociation and these very interesting things that I was doing that again, she was the falcon kind of observing me. And there were just things I didn't realize that I was doing to try to control chaos because it just felt too overwhelming for my system.
hmm
And it's things like that, the symbology that's helped me kind of understand my childhood more and chaos and how has that shaped my life.
I love that. And I love the symbolism that's with it as well, because I do feel like it gives you an opportunity to pull the meaning in the way that you want to understand
Mhm.
it. You're not pulling it from anybody else. You're not having to, read a book to see what this means. Now, I do sometimes Google things
Mhm.
just because I'm curious to know what a spiritual connection is. And I always find it really interesting how closely related it is to something, but you still have the ability to finish out that story, to then pull from it and get from it what you need to be able to make a decision or move forward or shift, and pivot. And you keep coming back to the word courage. And I love that you keep talking about this because I don't think that this word is used enough. We tend to use like being strong and being brave, but there is a sense of courage. There is this sense of inner feeling within yourself that I feel like we all go through, especially when we start going through this healing journey, when we start taking, like you said, those higher perspectives and kind of viewing all the things around it. And it takes a lot of courage to step out of the victimhood or the blaming or the old stories that we're telling ourselves and deciding to be like, there's got to be something different. There has to be something else that I'm missing. And
Mhm.
I love this word, I think, more than anything, because being courageous transforms you into the things that you want to do moving forward. They push you into self-awareness. They push you into that want to growth. They push you into that uncomfortable space of making a decision to leave someone, to be with someone, like all of those things. It doesn't take you being strong. It doesn't take you being brave. Like there's a lot of courage and also self-understanding and building that trust up that I feel like comes first to be able to then spread that out. So I'd love your take on the word courage and
Oh
kind of
yeah.
how you see that too.
Yeah, but what I'd love to go back and forth with, again, kind of anchoring back to where we started of like peeling the skin from the snake and shedding these layers. Like,
Yeah.
what were our courageous moments? And it is really hard. As a kid, to go way out there, I would say as a kid, I always had this fear of what would it look like when I died, and what did that conversation look like? Like, did I live the life I was supposed to? Did I do all the right things? Did I follow the values I was supposed to? Even as a kid, I remember having an Excel spreadsheet in 80s and early 90s where I would create these values and I would score myself every day on if I was living into that value. And I have no idea where these ideas came from. Like
Wow.
nobody taught me these things, but later I always had this fear of, I think it's the Egyptians that weigh your heart. I just had these images. So, this idea of courage, I think all this is metaphorical, but it is this courage to face yourself. Like even as a kid, it's like who am I really, and who are these masks that I keep putting on all the time, and how do I peel back those layers to really, really see who I am? And I think in that, one of my big moments was, I will just say it, abandoning my family. I had a period in my 30s, and it really was when I had kids. I felt so stable, and I felt like I had the world. I had this great job, and we had this house, and we are going to have these kids. And I was in my early 20s, and I thought I've got this all figured out, and I'll be able to retire at this age. Like this is what life is like. And uh, my second child, having my second child, there was something that snapped inside of me, and it was like seeing my son was like seeing myself at that age. And it's like
Mm,
all the repressed stuff that I had never really remembered from, being a baby and a child. It's like all that stuff went into my son, and everything just kind of snapped, and it got really chaotic. And it was just so difficult to even be a parent and be around my children. And I couldn't figure out why. And that led me to affairs and a lot of behavior that I can't even recognize today. And there was this abandonment, now I realize, of me abandoning my family. And I went on a quest to figure that out. I flew to Peru, and I've gone all around the world, and I have a page in my document I spoke about that has 4 pages of all the healing work I've done, trying to figure out who the heck am I and why did I do this? And that was the courageous moment of, I realized leaving my family maybe wasn't the courageous moment, but facing myself of why did I abandon them, and where was I abandoned in my life? And that
mm.
has taken me to this place in writing books and different things, and cross-pollinating the business and personal spiritual world with this deep root of I always felt wrong. Again, going back to that story of me like grading my own values and thinking, was I right enough to pass through the pearly gates? All those ideas have changed, but there was this idea that I am so wrong, and like nobody wants to be around me because I'm so wrong and I'm so flawed. So this right versus wrong complex got really buried in me, and I just felt all that abandonment, and that turned into me abandoning others. And in that shadowy content that I had to sift through, was a lot of light, but it's really hard to stare at that in the mirror and have to go through that. So that's one of my
Yeah.
courageous moments. And I think, it's taken a long time to get down to like, what is the root of that? What is this right wrong complex? And why do I always feel so wrong all the time? And in
Hmm.
being wrong, there's this desire to just be invisible and to not exist or even be part of life. Because, why would I be here if I'm wrong? Um,
Yeah.
that's like a deep-seated thing in my DNA that, got sussed out from this journey. So that's one of my more courageous moments that's still in process.
Yeah, I love that. And thank you, so much for being so open and honest about that because I
Yeah.
don't feel like we all have the courage enough yet to be able to face that and to have those conversations and to be able to understand as you are going through this journey, now that you're on the other side, to realize that it isn't that anything is wrong with you. It's just for whatever reason, those pieces that were behind closed doors that you just didn't have access to that were acting out
Mhm.
consciously in front of everyone else. So I appreciate you sharing that
Yeah.
and letting people be able to hear that because that's something that's very near and dear to my heart as well, is having those kinds of conversations. When you were talking about your kids and you were talking about how you saw everything in them, and it's so funny that you say that because I think of my boys, and especially when I got out of my relationship and I started going into my healing journey. My oldest one was about 14, 15, and
Mhm.
there were so many things that he was reflecting back at me. And I remember being so triggered and just irritated. And I thought, like, it's just this unruly teen, like everybody says. And when I think about it now, I'm like, it really wasn't. Like, yes, there were some things in it, but there were also so many other things. There were things that he went through and things that he saw that he wasn't healed from, that he didn't understand, that were coming up to the surface that he didn't know how to deal with. And then he was reflecting that back at me, the same behavior that I was reflecting out to other people. And when I started noticing that, it was like this, like light bulb, like smack you in the head moment of like, oh my gosh, that's what I was doing for so long. And now I'm trying to heal from that. Okay, so now how do I help them understand that so they can go down their own journey of healing and understanding? And I think that that is something that is so courageous and something that we need more in this world, is giving ourselves space to know that it's not that we were wrong. We only did what we knew to do in that moment with the knowledge that we had. And it's not that we were flawed. It's just things that stuck to us for whatever reason that we then have to work through. And do you have the courage to work through that? And do you have the courage to give space to others who still maybe have not chosen to heal from that?
Hmm. Thank you for sharing that story. When you have children, it is like every day there's always content. There's something there that's trying to bring you closer to you, and there's a reciprocation of helping them understand who they are. And I
Yeah.
always say, sometimes I think my kids are more the adult than I am, because there's so much learning and teaching they're doing for me if I just pay attention. There's
Hmm.
really a kind of an equality there, more than you realize. That is hard. And going back to this Falcon idea, I think both of our stories share that. It's how in those moments do you have that insight and then integrate it on the ground, um, grab it a hold with like your talons, and you know what's happening, and then you take it to a higher perspective and say, okay, what's really happening, and how do I see this in other people?
Hmm.
I think that's very much something I'd love to see in the world, is this idea of beauty. I think beauty and chaos have this inverse relationship. And, my childhood was very chaotic, as I mentioned. But when you can sift through that chaos and you can see the beauty and order in it and lift yourself to a higher perspective, sometimes it all makes sense. And maybe there wasn't anything wrong. Maybe in everything we did, it was the right thing that had to happen for us. And
Yep.
that right thing had to take us to the next thing. It's just this own self-judgment we put onto it because we think there should be this yardstick that we have to be this, perfect soul doing all these things and look a certain way. But when you
Hmm.
get rid of judgment, it's like maybe it was exactly the thing that had to happen. And I think that with my kids. I mean, I have a really good relationship with my kids now, and I feel really, really, really lucky. Uh, but I understand like the quest I was on, and the story of my father and how that got passed to me, and if I can see the beauty in it, and sometimes it's only for like a few seconds, it gives me this like total faith that um, like everything is the way it's supposed to be.
Yeah, I love that too. And I think that, when people hear others talk about like, it's just who you are, it's just part of your journey, it is so hard to understand that and to think about that from that perspective when you are
Yeah.
in a space of feeling like so much has been done to you or so much wrong has happened in your life. And it really is interesting when you think about, like what you're saying, maybe that was part of it. And maybe that was what you were supposed to go through. So you had the ability to potentially discover it if you chose that path, which
Mhm.
then creates this ripple effect right into generations to come, right? I think about that when I think about my kids and how that healing and stuff like that, that wasn't really a thing when I was growing up. It was just, you were just supposed to be a good person. You strive for the highest, you achieve the highest. Like that was kind of it, right? And it's not that, that was bad. My family taught me with, again, that knowledge that they had with what they knew at that time. And now I have the ability to take a different perspective and now teach a different generation how to have tools and the ability to express and have courage and speak out at a much younger age, which gives them abilities for when they decide to have kids to be able to instill that at a younger age. And that I feel like is how you make a greater impact for those down the road. It isn't always about you and solving all of your problems and making sure that you are so healed, but it's understanding the lessons and then how do we teach those to others so that we continue pushing out this ripple effect to others so that other people have the ability and the choice to be able to choose because they learned something they didn't know. And I feel like you talk about that a little bit in your book as well, of just this healing and expression and understanding that things aren't always wrong, which I understand that that's a societal norm. There's a right and
Mhm.
there's a wrong. But there's also, I feel like, a very beautiful space of neutrality that we don't step into as much that I have found I loved
Yeah.
to stay in.
Yeah, yes, it's expansive and it's curious and it's open and it's gentle and it's soft when there's that place of just there's not a right or wrong. It's just your experience and I want to see you authentically in it. And there's so many layers to those stories. And I think it's just so interesting. It's emergence. We've talked about a lot of these words and we're circling around them, but this emergence of somebody is who they are, and everybody's unique. It's like I can't grade your emergence. It's
Yeah.
your own thing, and all these things beautifully had to happen. Like it was this orchestration of your life with all these notes and instruments all around you to give you this like perfect story. It's just that's the beauty I love of seeing and being with people. And I love you sharing this about speaking to your kids. I'm curious, like, and maybe you have these conversations. Like this courageous thing you tell your children is, "Hey, I'm seeing you in your emergence. Here's the courageous confidence or the things I mirror back to them or say to them." I'm curious what you do with them.
Yeah. So it's been interesting. I think the biggest thing for me when it came to giving them a space of reflection and understanding, it also meant accepting my own faults and
Mm.
announcing that to them versus trying to be like the perfect parent. And what I
Yeah.
realize, especially with boys, having those kinds of conversations, it gives them a space to just kind of think about it for a second. And we also have conversations where we create space for each other and space to take a break, which is something that didn't happen in my household, right? So that is something I work with them a lot. If I'm starting to get frustrated and my son reflects back to me, he's like, Mom, I don't know why you're getting so irritated, why you're getting triggered at me. And I'm like, I'm not triggered. I'm like, hold on a minute. Hold on a minute. And sometimes I do. I have to step back and I'm like, you know what? You are right. And I do apologize. That's not what I meant by that. I didn't say it in the way that I meant to say it. I was getting frustrated. What do you think about this? Right. And so it's this really interesting, like, give and take that is allowed in our household where there's still a mutual respect. I am still mom. And I realize, especially with my kids being 20 and 17 now, that there's also, like you said earlier, there's things that I get to learn from them because my years at that age were totally different. And I didn't have people to talk to me about it. So I get to have that curiosity and ask those questions so that I can better understand. And then we can walk through it together. And so that's kind of the thing is definitely space. That's been the biggest thing. So if one of us says, especially my oldest one, he'll be the first one to be like, this is not the time. And I'm like, you know what? I respect that. We'll have a conversation in a few minutes. I'll wait till you come back up. And that was not something that happened in our household. But I
Yeah.
feel like that is creating such a space for my boys to be able to then work through their own emotions in a way that works for them. But I do think that the reflection of doing the same thing is where they pick up on it, right? They always say that, monkey see, monkey do.
Mhm.
And I always thought it was funny because, your parents always say, do what I say, not what I do. Boy, that is a lie. They always do what they see. But the more that I started reflecting to my kids and showing them that openness and showing them the courage to be vulnerable and be like, you know what? Yeah, I'm wrong. Yeah, I screwed up. Yeah, I feel like I'm failing at this. The more that they started coming forward and started talking about things in their own way. And to me, that was the coolest moment for me to have with my kids.
Yeah. I love that story. It's so beautiful. And I just kept hearing honesty and realness and even this podcast, the space you create for us to be real and have a space to actually go back and forth and have a little bit of conflict and edge to it, just like with your son and your son's ability to say, hey, mom, you're triggered. Like, how beautiful is that to have a space you can just be real humans with each other and be like, okay, yeah, I am. Yep. Yep. I'm gonna come back and talk to you about it. Like just what wonderful parenting. Thank you for sharing that. And the origin of this of just not feeling like you had the space in childhood to do that.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And thank you for reflecting that back because I do
Yeah.
enjoy that. And I think that there is a way for us to have different perspectives and different ideas and still understand what each other are saying without feeling like we have to agree on everything. And I think that for me, that's where that neutrality has really come from of I really enjoy playing in that space because then I don't feel like you're coming at me with your ideas and taking away mine and vice versa, but I get to actually hear what you're saying. I get to hear how you're feeling. And then it's really unique because I feel like that gives me a space to be able to open up the doors even more to be like, oh, I've never thought about it like that,
Mhm.
or I get what you're saying. I don't necessarily agree, but you're still getting this untapped knowledge that you then get to see, I think, more of the whole picture of it versus when you're so shut down because
Yeah.
you only want to see your side and you only want people to agree with you. And that's probably one of my favorite spaces to be into, is
Yeah.
let's have a polarizing conversation. How do you see things differently than me? Because that's the beauty, like you said earlier, that's the beauty of everybody. We're all unique, we're all different. That's where the fun comes in, I feel like. And then being able to have those conversations to learn how people think about what they've been through,
Yeah.
that to me is like, again, that's that untapped knowledge that you can't get out of any book that
Yeah.
anyone has written because it's a lived experience.
Yeah. Exactly. And I love this idea of space, and we could probably go on for hours about space. I think it's so interesting how the childhood moments shape how much of you there is and how much actually emerges from that feeling small in that space, and you articulating everything that happened in you from that place is really beautiful. And same thing for me. I would say there wasn't much space growing up because dad had addictions and dad had a lot of different things going on, and that energetically took up the space, and there was always chaos and uncertainty. So I got used to just being really small. Small was the safest place. So, in wrongness or in the conflict you spoke about, there are actually benefits to me. Isn't being wrong, I can be small and not exist. I don't want to have to be in conflict because then I can be small.
Mm,
But eventually you feel that confinement and that trapping of being so small. You're like, okay, I do have space. And how do I emerge in that space? Just like the lotus flower from the ground, from nothing, it becomes something beautiful. I think these are kind of studies in how do you actually take up space, but do it in a harmonious way with other people. And there is this magic of the friction and the conflict when we don't judge each other and we just accept this as who we are as we are right now in this moment. So um,
yeah.
I find it beautiful. We kind of both emerged from this sense of not having space in childhood. So
Yeah, and I think that a lot of people go through that, right? I don't feel like
Mhm.
that is a small percentage of the
Yeah.
world. I mean, even when I talk to my kids, right, their world right now is like high school and their friends. Like that's it. Even though we are
Yeah.
like, yeah, but it's out here. We have to
Yeah.
acknowledge like where they are sitting, when it comes to meeting somebody where they are at so that you can help them grow. So I'm curious to know, what are some of the things that you feel that you lean into when you are coaching with people and helping them just to get into the space of seeing where they can emerge to be able to rise out?
Yeah, great question. One thing I do with coaching and in corporate workshops, I'm a huge fan of Carl Jung, studied depth psychology. I love active imagination, and it was part of my healing journey. Is I think when you're so used to looking at the world and seeing all the forms around you, you unconsciously create a small box around yourself. And when you can close your eyes and go on a journey into your inner world or to another place, you know, the ability to imagine and to create these worlds actually are part of you describing who you are. And in that, there is infinite space that everything inside of you can exist that maybe doesn't really want to emerge in this realm in front of us. So active imagination is a part of everything I do, and I love using it. There's lots of workshops I've done where it's a very unbusiness-like skill. Is how are you intuitive? How are you imaginative? How can you create these worlds? I don't think that's a celebrated skill, nor is it something I see a lot of organizations or even in schools them teaching. And
Hmm.
it's why I wrote this book. It was a way to go into my deeper universe and see a bigger world where all the parts of me could exist and I could talk about them.
Oh, I love this so much. Oh, John, we may have to have a part two for all this. Oh, I do want you though to talk about your book and give
Yeah.
people, because I know it's about to go live. I'm so excited about this for you. It'll be live by the time this episode releases. So give everybody kind of an insight to this book and what you've come up with, and this journey that you're taking people on through it.
Yeah, yeah. It was really, I think, my soul trying to write my journey so that I could actually read it and pay attention to it. So it was done through some really painful moments of my life. So it's very much, I think, an artistic book. It's trying to express myself through these moments in my writing. The book is really a journey towards home. It's how do we find home inside of ourselves? For me, that was my tale and journey of how do I find fatherhood, but fatherhood for myself and me as a father. That's told through romantic relationships and a lot of addictions. So uh, I, I think it's an interesting book. I try to be really raw and authentic and real with it. So it comes out mid-February. The book's called Horribly Lovely. So if you Google horriblylovely.com, I think you'll go to the website and you can check it out.
I am super excited for this. And I feel like there's such a beauty in you sharing your message and who you are and the things that you have been through in this like open light where people kind of get to find themselves within it and then choose what they feel like really connects to them. And then they have the opportunity to then put that into their own perspective or their own life and the way that they move forward. And it's really interesting to me when I think of all the people that I've talked with that have written books, that do coaching now, that have been through these situations. We all have our own stories in how we went through something and perceived it. But what's really interesting is I find that everybody ends up coming back to the center of, who am I? Who do I want to choose to be? And how did what I went through shape that so that I can then now be what I want and heal from this so that I don't hate it, but it's just a part of the journey naturally. And I think that more of us are looking for that and looking for that support and that inspiration and that connection through other people's stories, because we do hide from it. We do keep it to ourselves. I think of how many people I walk by and see all the time. You never know what they have been through. You would never know the things that they had dealt with. I mean, heck, I worked at a medical field for 5 years. No one would have known that I was in a domestic abusive situation,
Yeah.
right? We are really good, like you said earlier, at putting those masks on and being one person in front of other people. And because we do that, we're also teaching our younger generations to do that as well. And so it really does come back to, how do you take those masks off? How do you have the courage to be you and start in that space? Because that ultimately is going to lead generations to come into seeing things differently and hopefully knowing that they don't have to hide behind so many things.
Yeah. Oh, I have goosebumps. So beautifully said. I don't even know if I have anything to add other than the shedding of the snake skin earlier.
Oh, I love that.
There is this. Yes, I was abused. Yes, I was addicted. Yes, I was abandoned. Yes, I abandoned other people. It's like I own the skin. That was part of who I was, but it wasn't. It wasn't all of me. It wasn't the me. And it's like in saying it and owning it, you create the skin. At the same time, it's shedding. And then you do that again and again and again. And I think this place of that centerness you spoke about, or home, my word that I was using, is you eventually shed so many skins that there's nothing there. And in this home, you've arrived at this place of nothingness, which sounds so paradoxical. But in that home is where nothing is, everything can exist. And you realize there's this profound freedom that there's something much larger of who you are than you ever realized. It's those layers of skin that were trapping you in this idea of you being really small. And it's difficult to talk about or write about or explain that process, but it's a really beautiful, messy, messy journey.
I think that we all have that too, right?
Yeah.
Like
Hmm.
everybody wants to say like, oh, it wasn't that bad. Oh, it was, but it's like it really is like that, I think is where we are missing that connection.
Yeah.
Like crap sucked. We went through stuff. We didn't make
Yeah.
the best choices at that time. But again, we're seeing it from a totally different light when we're looking at it back then. So
Yeah.
like the messy is fine. The messy
Yeah.
happens, usually
Yeah.
more than once, but it
Yeah.
happens. And then you're right. That is the beauty of it. And I love this analogy of shedding the skin from the snake. I love snakes anyway, but I love I love this thought because it really is. And I think that that is where growth comes from, right? You can continue to grow and shed that skin, which allows you to continue to grow
Yeah.
wholeheartedly from inside out, or you can choose to be stagnant and that skin is still going to want to peel, but
Yeah.
you're just going to let it keep sticking and building up these layers to where it does kind of shut you off from the
Mhm.
outside world. And so just being aware of that, I think, is the biggest thing. Being aware of where you see yourself. Are you pushing yourself away? Are you hiding from people? Or do you feel like maybe you've hit a space where like it's time to grow again? And just being aware of that, I think, is the biggest thing. So as we're coming to a close, Jon, do you have any last words or anything you'd like to leave the audience with?
Yeah. There's a couple ideas I have. One, I think in writing this book, I had to really look at the mythic tale. Like I was looking at stories of the myth of Aries, the myth of Libra. I was going to all these different places to find these like archetypal stories, and I think in that search of shedding your skin, you're trying to find this deepest story that's calling to you. And to me, it's like the hardest rock. It's like this impermanent place that you can shatter yourself against. And in shattering yourself, you're shattering those layers and you're realizing these are the lies I've told myself. And once you do that, there is a truth inside of you that I found that's remarkable. So the advice I would say is like keep digging for your deepest story, for that mythic tale. If you find people that trigger you, see them as the hardest rock that you are throwing your lies against. And it doesn't have to be painful, but let yourself be shattered sometimes and let yourself see, what's the truth that's emerging inside of you would be the thing I'd leave, I think.
Oh, I love that. That is, oh, I have like this whole image in my head. Sorry, I'm a very visual person, so I just see like this shattering. I love it. So Jon, do me a favor, then tell everybody where they can find you and how they can connect with you.
Yep. Instagram, Hatched in Love, is the Instagram handle, so you can follow me there. Or horriblylovely.com. You can find me there. Both places I'm there, so happy to talk to you anytime. The Horribly Lovely place, there is a community. If you buy the book, or if you don't, you can just join a community, and there's a place that we can talk about the chapters and have back and forth conversations, or even do like joint group conversations about what's coming up for you. So all places you can find me.
Oh, I love it. Thank you so much, Jon. And thank you again so much for being so open and so honest and so real in your story and the things that you've been through and shedding this light for others to see that like it's just a journey and we all have this messy middle. I can't thank you enough for sharing that.
Well, thank you. Thank you for letting me be real. It's just a wonderful space. I appreciate the conversation on what you're doing for the
Yeah.
world. Thanks,
You
Kat.
are so welcome. Thank you. And to everybody else out there, I know that this was probably a lot to take in, and I know that there were some points in here that really, really hit you. I'm going to encourage you to go back and listen to those things that created that twinge or created that goosebump moment, because obviously something is speaking to you from within this conversation. And maybe that is exactly what your soul is looking for at this moment. It is the small things that we tend to push aside that really is what our body is calling us to pay attention to. So be present, be aware, and until next time, do one thing positive for someone each and every day and see the difference that it makes in your life. Catch you later. Thank you so much for tuning in to Real Chat with Kat today, where real stories meet real solutions. If you loved today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave us a review on Apple, and share this with someone who may also need to hear this as well. Let's also keep the conversation going. Follow me on socials at The Lotus Effect, connect with our incredible guests, and remember, you are never alone. Your story matters, and you have the ability and the power to rewrite it. You always have a choice. Until next time, stay strong, stay inspired, and keep showing up as the incredible, unstoppable